Welcome to Wisdom Flix, Scam 1992, history biggest financial scam, the Big Bull scam. Let's move on. What is Scam 1992? Who was behind the scam? How it got executed? What were the impacts? Let us see. What is Scam 1992? The 1992 scam was the biggest stock market scam ever committed in the Indian stock market. The scam impacted the entire exchange system as the securities system collapsed and investors lost thousands of rupees in the exchange system. The scope of the scam was so large that the net value of the stock was higher than the health budget and education budget of India. The scam exposed the inherent loopholes of the Indian financial systems and resulted in a completely reformed system of stock transactions and an introduction of online security systems. Who was behind the scam? Harshit Shandilal Mehta was an Indian stockbroker. Mehta's involvement in the 1992 Indian security scam made him infamous as a market manipulator. Harshit Shandilal Mehta was born on 29 July 1954 at Paneli Moti, Rajkot district in Gujarat Jain family. His early childhood was spent in Ghatkopar, where his father was a small-time textile businessman. Later, the family moved to Raipur, Madhya Pradesh. Mehta committed a fraud over 10 billion from the banking system of India to buy stocks on the Bombay Stock Exchange. Mehta started his career as a salesperson in the Mumbai office of New India Assurance Company Limited. During this time, he got interested in the stock market and after a few days resigned and joined a brokerage firm. Over a period of 10 years, beginning from 1980, he served in the positions of increasing responsibility at a series of brokerage firms. By 1990, he had risen to a position of prominence in the Indian securities industry, with the media touting him as Amitabh Bachchan of the stock market. How did he execute the plans? Plan number 1, Stamp paper fraud. Up to the early 90s, banks in India were not allowed to invest in the equity markets. However, they were expected to post profits and retain a certain ratio of their assets in the government fixed interest bonds. Mehta cleverly squeezed capital out of the banking system to address the requirement of banks and pump this money into the share market. He also promised the bank higher rates of interest while asking them to transfer the money into his personal account under the guise of buying securities from the other banks. At that time, a bank had to go through a broker to buy securities and forward bonds from other banks. Mehta used this money temporarily in his account to buy shares, thus hiking up demand of certain shares dramatically, selling them off and passing on a part of the proceeds to the bank and kept the rest for himself. This resulted in the stocks like ACC, which was trading in 1991 for rupees 200 per share to nearly rupees 9,000 in just 3 months. Plan number 2, bank receipt fraud. Another instrument used in a big way was the bank receipt. In a ready-forward deal, securities were not moved back and forth in actuality. Instead, the borrower, that is, the seller of the securities, gave the buyer of the securities a BR, which is a bank receipt. The BR serves as a receipt from the selling bank and also promises that the buyer will receive the securities that have paid for at the end of the term. Having figured this out, Mehta needed banks which could issue fake BRs or BRs not backed by any government securities. Once these fake BRs were issued, they were passed on to other banks and the banks in turn gave money to Mehta, plainly assuming that they were lending against government securities when this was not the real case. He took the price of ACC from 200 to 9,000 rupees. That was an increase of 4,400%. The stock markets were overheated and the bulls were on a mad run. Since he had to book profits in the end, the day he sold was the day when the market crashed. Plan number 3, outbreak of 1992 securities fraud. A typically ready-forward deal involved two banks brought together by a broker in lieu of commission. The broker handles neither the cash nor the securities, though that wasn't the case in the lead-up to the fraud. In the settlement process, deliveries of the securities and payments were made through the broker. That is, the seller handed over the securities to the broker, who passed them to the buyer, while buyer gave the check to the broker, who then made the payment to the seller. In the settlement process, the buyer and the seller might not even know whom they had traded with, either being known only to the broker. These brokers could manage primarily because by now they had become market makers and had started trading on their own. To keep up a semblance of legality, they pretended to be undertaking the transaction on behalf of a bank. Mehta used forged BRs to gain unsecured loans and used several small banks to issue BRs on demand. Once these fake BRs were issued, they were passed on to other banks, and the banks in turn gave money to Mehta, assuming that they were lending against government securities when this was not really the case. This money was used to drive up the prices of stock in the stock market. When time came to return the money, the shares were sold for a profit and the BR was retired. The money due to the bank was returned. This went on as long as the stock prices kept going up and no one had a clue about Mehta's operations. The impact. The impact of the scam had many consequences, which included the loss of money to lakhs of families, but more importantly, the immediate crash of the stock market. The index fell from 4,500 to 2,500, representing a loss of rupees 1,000 billion in market capitalization. The scam was orchestrated in such a way that Mehta secured securities from the bank against forged checks and failed to deliver the securities. Mehta made the prices of the stock so high through fictitious practices and would go on to sell the stocks that he owned in these companies. On 23 April 1992, journalist Sujata Dalal exposed Mehta's illegal methods in a column in the Times of India. Mehta was dipping illegally into the banking system to finance his buying. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.